All right. So I am going to walk you guys through creating a sheath template. This is the knife. This is a jackal. The other jackals that I have made, let's see. The other jackals that I've made have all been pancake style sheaths. So the template that I have currently is a pancake sheath, which would be similar to this. Not a folded over sheath like I do for a lot of my other styles of knife, but an angle carry is another way it's described as, or a cowboy style sheath or whatever. So I'm going to make a template for this jackal that is a normal folded over vertical belt loop carry sheath. So that's what we're going to do now. And I'm totally guessing at the position of that. Hopefully you can see this. But we'll walk you guys through this. I'm going to start by folding my paper in half. This will represent the way that the leather folds over. I'm going to trace the profile of the knife as a starting point. Based on the thickness of the handle, and the thickness of the spine of the knife is going to be important to gauge how far away from that fold you're going to need to start. This is something that I've just gotten very familiar with because I've done this a lot. So I just kind of know right thereabouts where I need to be. I've made, I don't even know how many, probably 100 different sheath templates like this. And there's a handful of them that I use often that fit a variety of knives that I remake the similar style, but there'll always be one-off knives or customers that have me make sheaths for knives that I didn't make. And anyway, I've made a ton of these and I just kind of gotten a really good feel for it. But if you haven't got a good feel for it, know that paper is a lot thinner than the thickness of the leather. So if I was to like fold this over and kind of measure things out, you need to account for the thickness of the leather, and it is going to be too small if you make it exactly to size on paper. So there's some wiggle room there that you need to account for because the thickness of the leather. But if I was to have that spine centered on my fold and lay it over, that is going to be really close. And I don't know if you can see that there, but that's probably, I don't know, 1/4 inch, maybe. I'm gonna leave it right there to start with. I'm just tracing the profile. There is two different ways that you could go about doing this. One would be that the handle of the knife is parallel to the fold. The other would be that the clip point or the drop is parallel to the fold. I tend to run the handle parallel with the fold because I think it lends itself to a much smoother drawing and resheathing action, as well as better retention. When you run it like this, there ends up being a pretty wide mouth to the sheath that is not near as secure, and I've learned that the hard way from trying different things and making mistakes. But the handle is parallel to the fold, and the clip points like this or trailing point knives can be pretty tricky as far as smooth drawing and resheathing action, because that point is so acute and so easy to hang up on different spots in that path. So you want to be mindful of that. Normal drop points or more traditional blade shapes like this, for example, go in and out of a sheath far easier because of that more straight back versus the clip. So distance from the actual edge to the outside edge of my sheath is going to be eyeballed at roughly 1/2 inch. You can measure this out if you want to, but you don't really need to. This is a template. You'll notice that I am increasing slightly the distance here to here versus here to here. That is intentional. Now at this point, I can either bring this all the way over, and there'll be a bigger piece of welt here to fill that, but the overall size of the sheath would get a little bit big, a little bit wide. If I was gonna tool a more artistic sheath, like a deer head or a animal or something, I may want to do that to lend myself some more surface area for the design, but in this case I'm not. It'll just be a pattern or a border or something a little more simple. So I'm gonna take it at an angle like this, and you can match the curve of the clip if you want, to better represent the profile of the knife. You certainly don't have to. You can make it straight, but I'm gonna match that clip because I think it's just a little bit more cool to better match the profile of the knife. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road as far as the rest of the sheath is where experience kind of comes into play. The height in which you run this is personal preference. But you want to leave enough handle out of the sheath to be easy to grab. The deeper that knife rides in the sheath, it's going to be more secure. So based on the use or the intended user, they may want something that's more secure. Or if I was going to put a button snap on here for retention, I may be able to leave more handle exposed. So this is just based on the intended use of an average user. I'm going to leave about that much out of the sheath. It's just enough that it's easy to grab, but there's still enough handle into the sheath that it's going to hold really well. So this is going to be right-handed is the way that I'm setting this up. I'm using my ruler here for my belt loop. Going to just stay with the width of the ruler for the width of that loop. I also want to pay attention to where that ruler lands down in the body of the sheath. I haven't decided yet if this loop's going to fold on the inside or the outside, but I want to know where that stitch for the loop is going to land inside of this area. I don't want it to land too close to the edge because it'll interfere with whatever design I do as far as the border and or tooling that I may do on this sheath. So I want that stitch to land here, not over here. So that's why that is going to be there. If I wanted to, I could favor it more this way or just make it wider. But that is the gist of this particular side. You can angle this more or less or opposite. You can play with that however you want to as far as design. And then now I'm gonna cut that. These folded sheaths like this are a lot easier to design versus pancake sheath or the button snaps. Those take a lot more time. Or if the knife has a guard on it, if it's a hidden tang with a guard, those sheath templates are much more difficult to design well. They take maybe 2 or 3 attempts to really nail the retention. If I was doing a snap or a pancake sheath, I would be doing a lot more back and forth with the knife. But I've got this is folded over now so that my sides are symmetrical. And that's where I'll stop, because we are going to now bring this over there to make the front of the sheath a little different from the back. So just kind of figure out how we want this to look. I can drop this down, I can arch it up, I could go straight across. I could do a number of different things here with this sheath. And I think what I'm gonna do is bring it down just a little bit. I think that'll look nice. Now you can kind of get a feel for how much handle is going to be exposed. It'll be easier when I cut that out. Some of the templates that I use more so than others, I'll make out of a thin piece of wood, or you can use cardboard or even a piece of leather. So there's some more rigidity to it. It makes it a lot easier to save that design. Okay, so when we lay this in there like that, we fold this over, we're going to get a good feel for how much handle will be exposed on that sheath. Now, at this moment in time right here is when I really would want to decide, am I going to fold this on the inside, or am I gonna fold it on the outside? If I was gonna fold it on the outside, the length of this loop is probably sufficient. It may be just a little bit short. But for a standard male's belt, the width of the belt is usually 1.5 to 2 inches. So you wanna make sure that you have at least 2 inches of clearance right here for the belt. And that's probably really close. But if I'm gonna fold it on the inside, if I was gonna do more tooling on this and I wanted it to look pretty, this is not near long enough. There's 1/2 inch of loop there for the belt. So I would need to extend this by 3 or 4 inches to make sure I have plenty to work with. And then after I get it cut out, then I can trim off extra length as needed to get it right. But you definitely want to err to the side of caution and have more length here and trim it back as needed versus cutting it out and it being too short. So now I want to talk about the welt on this real quick, just because this is something that I learned along my journey. In the past, I would have made this welt straight like this, and that does not lend itself to easy resheathing action. It gets really tight and really difficult, especially when this opens up to account for the volume of knife that goes in there. You put a lot of stress right there on that corner, and your leather will want to open up on you. And it'll hold, but the puts a lot of stress on the stitch right here. And if they open up too much, your knife edge could accidentally slide in the gap and cut your stitch. So you want to be mindful of this area right here. Some people will throw a rivet there or a double stitch. There's a number of ways to kind of beef that up. But if the sheath is designed really well, that isn't necessary. And what I mean by that, by being designed really well, is you want to think of this like a funnel. This being the bottom of the funnel and opening up wider as you get to the top, so that the sheath guides that knife home and isn't that you want some room for error up here towards the top so that it's easy in and out, but it tightens up as it comes in and kind of goes home, so to speak, and finds the right spot. So with my welt design, I will bring this up and then taper it back like that. This welt design, and this is only learned from making mistakes in the past, but that welt design here, if my stitch location is set on that kind of a line, you want to be really careful when you punch your holes for your stitch that you don't miss the welt. This is very important, not to leave that stitch exposed. But having that stitch right on that transition is gonna keep this really tight and not have any gaps to where that edge could come through and cut the stitch on accident. But this is that funnel shape that I'm talking about. When you go to put that knife in the sheath, there's a ton of room up here at the top to find the opening, and then as that knife goes in, boom, it finds its perfectly created void for that knife to live. Now, this blade shape with that trailing point is challenging for this one reason right here. If this welt is here, it'll want to catch, boom, right there. When you put this knife in a sheath, that point wants to catch on that welt. And it can be kind of annoying to then have to push that tip down to get it to go in the rest of the way. Imagine, if you will, not looking at your sheath, but just doing a blind resheath. You know, you use your knife, do whatever you need to do, and then boom, you want to run it back into the sheath. You don't want to just catch it right there and your tip binds up. You want it to just go in nice and easy. So this welt design right here needs to change just a little bit. Instead of following my exact profile of the knife, I'm gonna straighten this up like that. It may be really subtle, and you may think that it won't make that big of a difference, but I promise you that it will. Now, when you bring that knife home, it will be a lot less likely to hang up right there because you've got a little bit of wiggle room, and it's gonna just find its way all the way to the bottom. That right there is a complete template for me then to take over to the leather, being mindful that I may extend the loop another 2, 3, 4 inches depending on how I decide to make this sheath. The other thing that's really important is knowing if you're going to make a right-handed or left-handed sheath. You know, being that there's a rough side and a smooth side to leather, you need to be really mindful of which way this is facing. Real easy way to double check your work is to fold it up, hang it on your side, and make sure it's facing the right way. In this case, when I lay this down to trace it, that's right hand, that is left hand. Try not to tear up your paper. So, welt design is key, leaving yourself enough material to account for the thickness of the leather. Again, the distance between my fold and my actual spine is 3/8 of an inch right down here and 1/4 inch up here at the top. There's considerable distance right here. Don't lay that in there all the way over because it'll be too tight. So there you have it. That's the sheath template for this knife. If you're ever at all worried about it, make it wider than you need and then trim it back after the fact. You can always take material away, but you cannot add it after you've cut this out. So if you're worried about it, instead of a 1/2 inch, you can do 3/4 and know that you're gonna trim it back later. So anyway, that's the basics of a very simple sheath design. And if this was, excuse me, if this was a straight backed knife and didn't have that clip point, it would be a lot easier to not have to deal with this part. But same basic principle applies as far as the funnel concept of bringing that knife home and not making it super narrow the entire sheath. You want to widen that out at the top and make it like a funnel. Hope this is helpful to some of you. Lots of practice is the only way to make this easier. You know, this is a few minutes and some paper. You can make 5 different templates for the same knife just to practice. And after you've made a few of them, you kind of get a feel for how paper translates to leather. But yeah, hope it's helpful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.